The Africans held in bondage in the Choctaw and Chickasaw nations were freed in 1866. When the Civil War ended, a year before, both tribes were reluctant to release their slaves so easily without distinct directives as to what to do with the newly freed slaves. There would suddenly be in both nations a substantial number of free blacks now on their soil, and the tribes had immediate concerns about the presence of these free Negroes, and each nation wanted to determine where these free blacks could go and what limitations could be put upon their status in the tribe. Negotiations took place in Washington, D.C. in the winter of 1865-66, and a joint treaty with the two nations was adopted. It was finally signed in late April, a full year after the end of the Civil War. The United States had hoped to encourage the two tribes to adopt their freedmen, and if they failed, the expectation was to establish a Negro colony in the least district. This directive was sent out by Chief Peter Pitchlynn of the Choctaw Nation and Governor Winchester Colbert of the Chickasaw Nation. Both of them urged ratification of the new treaty. Interestingly, both had owned slaves and were now negotiating the terms for their freedom. Meanwhile, word of their impending freedom had already reached the enslaved people. Word had reached many communities and farms and plantations in both tribes before the end of the war, and there was the rumor that the chains of bondage were about to be broken. Many of the male slaves had already sipped a taste of freedom when they managed to escape to Fort Gibson to enlist in the Union Army, choosing to fight for their freedom. One such man was Bynum COLBERT. Sometimes known as Bynum COLBERT, he was born in the Mushlatubbee district of the Choctaw Nation. Both of his parents were slaves, his father Ben and his mother Easter. Sim COLBERT was a Choctaw Indian and the slave owner. Born about 1849.